Box and Six always. That's for the culture.
Welcome back, y'all. This is the Bucks and Six podcast. I am your host, Danilo Jose De Hoya, and welcome to the third issue. It's been a crazy ride so far. It's going to get even crazier, hopefully. Anyways, like I said last week, we're going to start this sort of mini series. I'm titling it They Got Next. So we'll go into that later on, what that whole thing means, but basically what we're going to do is just look at every team and just think about who's gone next, who's that next guy that's gonna step up, who's that next guy that's gonna show he's worth like a max contract or even just a contract in general. But before we get into all that, you guys know how we start off every podcast with the take of the day. So in this take of the day, Kobe White will win Sixth Man of the Year. The way that the Chicago Bulls are structured right now, well, first of all, they had one of the best, if not the best off seasons, I think, just from how drastically different their team is perceived now. Because, in my opinion, I don't want to say they're locked just so I don't jinx them, but I would be very surprised if they're not in the playoff picture because I definitely think they will be. But anyways, with the way the team's constructed right now, I don't think Kobe White's going to start. However, I don't think that undermines that he's not a crazy basketball player because he's got the mold of a bucket getter. Big guard, I believe he's 6'5", averaged about 15, 4, and 5 last year, which I think considering he is still kind of getting into the groove of things in the league, that being his second year, pretty nice. You'll never be mad that a guy's averaging those kinds of numbers. However, the main thing with this take is that I think it's all contingent on him buying into the role. I understand if he would want to be traded, especially if he doesn't get a starting spot, because I think how Kobe White is right now could definitely be a starter on a different team. Not necessarily a starter on, I think, a playoff or a contending team. However, if you're one of those teams that are, maybe you had a recent run of success, but now your veterans are getting old, or just overall you're going through a stage of a rebuild, Kobe White could be your guy. If I were to give him a destination, however, perhaps we're looking at the Mike Conley replacement, but you never know. Regardless, I think he has the chance to be a top-tier six-man in the league, but overall, I think it's just an extreme luxury that the Bulls have, being that he was still like a top 10 pick. He was 7th. Either way, if Kobe White were to stay with the Bulls, fingers crossed he does, I would definitely pencil him in as the Sixth Man of the Year award favorite.
Guarantee!
So, like I said earlier, the title of this issue is called They Got Next, and what we're going to do in it is, again, go through every team. For this issue, we're going to focus strictly on the Central Division because that is Milwaukee's division. Always got to go show love to my Bucks. But here's the criteria we're going to go through. So again, we're going to go through each and every team in the league. I don't know what order we're going to go in yet. However, again, we're starting with the Central Division. So we're going to go through their core. Who are the guys that their team is sort of built around? Who's going to pop off? Who's going to be that guy that's going to jump a few levels into another echelon of the NBA? Who's going to slump? They're these guys who are coming off of really good years or have been really good for a while, and maybe they'll begin to, because Father Time's undefeated, start to hit that regression. Hopefully not, though, but no one's exempt from this list. Unless you're a god tier player. But anyways, aside from that, we're going to also look at players who could potentially be on the trading block, guys that could be moved. With that, we're going to look at why they should be traded and what the team should look for in return. Now, back to the beginning of this, the core. So you're going to think, what makes someone part of their core? And what I really thought of it was, this is the player you instantly think of when you hear their name. Like, for example, Bucks, Giannis. Chicago, Zach LaVine. Lakers, every all-star from the 2012 Western Conference. Sorry, that was a really bad joke. But either way, these are the players you instantly think of when you hear their name, as well as these are the guys who are constantly making a positive impact. For example, Marcus Smart. Guy's not putting up 20 a game. However, he is in that upper echelon, that top tier. I put him right, not as good as Drew Holiday as a perimeter defender, but he's on his heels, I feel, because Marcus Smart he's a dog, and I love that. Now, that also leads into what is, for lack of a better term, popping off. So what that is I thought of it as, that's taking that next step, I think we constantly think of popping off as, oh, this guy propelled himself into MVP conversation, this guy propelled himself into all-star conversations, but I don't think we should necessarily have that be the baseline of it. I think the main thing would be that these guys are primarily solidifying themselves as a go-to guy down the stretch. Some fate of the universe, the aliens got the death beat on my head type beat. You know, the guys that if they start off the night like pretty shaky, they're not going to lose their confidence. These are the guys that are going to constantly push through and get to that next gear that allows for both longevity in the league as well as popping off. Now, right before we get into everything, we just got to look at the ideas of the trades. So for these ones, I'm not too focused on realism. The thing I'm mainly looking at is fit relatively. However, I'm not saying that, oh, the Lakers are going to trade LeBron to get younger. No, nothing like that. So when I say realism, I mean mainly like guys that either sign new contracts, but they'll still have to go through that waiting period. So we're not going to look strictly at trades that'll happen before the season actually starts. We're going to look at guys who are potentially going to wait till around the deadline, whether they're, you know, a veteran on a young team looking to go to a contender, or just guys in general where them being traded at the beginning of the season doesn't make any sense and they'll happen throughout. But with that, let's get right into it. All right, so first team we're going to talk about, super surprising, but it's the Milwaukee Bucks. So our core as it is right now, I would consider to be Giannis, Cash Money, and Drew Holiday. Those are the three guys that this team is built around, and the three guys that in order to succeed, they have to succeed for the most part. However, I would say our roster is still pretty deep, and the person I believe is going to pop off is Dante DiVincenzo. I think with Dante DiVincenzo, he's going to play with a big chip on his shoulder, considering the fact that the Milwaukee Bucks are coming off a championship. However, Dante obviously got hurt in that first round, and I just think that the player that Dante is, obviously I would be disappointed too. At the parade, I could see like a little hesitance, or what I thought was like a little hesitance with the trophy, just because obviously to say he wasn't part of them winning it is completely dumb. However, if you're the person directly in that situation, I would understand why you feel like you're a little undeserving. So with that, I think Dante's going to use that as fuel for the season in order to really pop off. I think with Drew Holiday, I'm hoping that he's sort of mentoring him if he's not already, just because Dante DiVincenzo, super good defender. I think he's an ideal 3-and-D guard in the Bucks lineup, can shoot the ball, can defend like crazy, and has decent size and is all around like a pretty good rebounder for his size. I think he's 6'4", and he's still grabbing some nice boards out there. Person I think is going to slump, Brook Lopez. I think with him coming into his age 33 season, that regression is right there. However, if you were to look at this a few years ago before Brook Lopez did the jumper, I think he would have already sort of plummeted, just because, see, with the way Brook played, it was very physical, very very in the paint, very directly involved with banging around, something that can lead to regression happening faster rather than someone who's, say, constantly camping out on the perimeter. And I think with Brook adding the three ball to his game, it would really contribute to him being able to have a longer career. Hopefully he doesn't. Fingers crossed I'm wrong about this, but if there were to be anyone that were to, it'd be Brook. Potential trade person. Obviously, I don't think he's being traded right now just because he's a recently traded or recently acquired acquisition, but Semi Ojeleye. I like his game from what I was able to see. However, again, I think a big thing I like about this team is that a lot of our bench players have the ability to not just catch and shoot, but to get the ball off the dribble, make something else happen. Us obviously having good three-point shooting is obviously a really big need. However, I think allowing that to really be our only counter against the wall, against the Giannis wall, and him kicking it out to someone could be really easy to pick up on. So with someone like Semi, he's very much a catch and shooter, plays good defense, which I love. But I think someone like, say, a Grayson Allen or a Rodney Hood, you know, those guys who can shoot the ball effectively, but can also do more with it, whether it be driving it out, dribbling to get a better shot. I prefer those guys over Semi. However, we'll see what happens. Again, I like Semi Ojeleye, and I'm excited for him to be a Buck. All right, and we got the Indiana Pacers now. Their core, they have a pretty big core in my opinion. I consider their core to be obviously Sabonis, Brogdon, Karras, TJ McConnell, and Miles Turner. That TJ McConnell one's really weird, I know, but the man had a triple-double in steals, which is crazy because the league record is 11, so he's one off of like tying it, or he was. But either way, he's that guard that you need on your team. You know, he's the guy that is going to hustle every play, like 110% every time he's out there. But either way, their person to pop off, I would consider it to be Karis LeVert slash, this one's like a little bit of a bias pick, but O'Shea Brissett. Karis LeVert is obviously, he was that guy that could have been that third option. However, obviously I take Harden over him now, but I think Karis LeVert is really going to grow into his own this season, considering that I think he had like some health problem that kept him out for a while, whether like blood clots or something. I could be wrong, but either way, Karis LeVert I think is going to pop off, easy 20 plus point per game scorer. And I think like his ceiling could honestly potentially sneak into the All-Stars if he's like playing insane. I'm not saying that's a lock, but I think that's his ceiling. And then with O'Shea Brissett, I think with COVID as well as a few injuries here and there, he got a lot of good runs in, and I think he'll be able to build off of that this season, just because he is coming in with that extra chip on his shoulder, considering he wasn't very highly touted coming out of college. So, him being Canadian as well, I'm very much cheering for him and hoping he has a good season. All right, the slumper this year. I picked TJ Warren. He's coming off a season-ending injury, and even now he's still without a timetable, and I think when he comes back, I don't know what Pacers fans are thinking, but I think some people are thinking they're going to get bubble TJ Warren back. I just don't think that's going to happen, just because a lot of NBA players saw the bubble as way easier than, say, playing at an away game, just because you're on neutral territory. Not to say TJ Warren can't get over that. However, I would say when he does come back, to see him averaging the numbers he did in the bubble, I would say is unlikely. Potential trade piece. This one's going to be super controversial, but I'm picking Domantas Sabonis to be their potential trade piece. I think the Indiana Pacers have a lot of good pieces, and they're just either one really big fish or a couple medium fish away from not being necessarily a contender, but definitely being a force in the playoffs, because, I mean, they're coming off a play-in game. They lost that. But I think they still have a chance to make the playoffs this season. And I think that would start potentially with trading Domantas Sabonis. I know he's an all-star. However, I think with Domantas Sabonis, he doesn't shoot that well from the three. Whereas most of their other starters, actually pretty much all their other starters, are very capable of shooting the three, especially Miles Turner. I know a lot of people at first were expecting Miles Turner to be the sort of trade guinea pig for the Indiana Pacers. However, I just think Miles Turner's ability to stretch out the floor and just him being able to be a big shot blocker and him being on a very like well-valued contract, because he only gets paid $18 million a year, yet he plays good defense and is able to shoot the three. I'd take that man any day. But if I were to trade Sabonis, I would obviously want picks and, you know, some good depth players, guys who can shoot the shit out the rock, you know what I'm saying? If I were to pick a team, it's hard just because he is one of those more highly touted players. I think a team that could potentially use him, I was thinking the Charlotte Hornets, but when I was like tinkering around, I couldn't really figure out any of the trades just because of the money wouldn't match and stuff like that. But either way, I think if the Indiana Pacers were to trade anyone, it's going to be hard to pill to swallow, but Domantas Sabonis, I just think if you put it, he needs to be on a team where the offense is sort of flowing through him. Obviously, because his father was like crazy good big man who could like pass it as well. Giving Sabonis the ability to do that would be better. But I think with Domantas Sabonis, he could still obviously develop a three ball. However, if the Indiana Pacers were to trade someone, honestly, I don't blame them if they don't go for a trade, but if they were to trade anyone on their team right now, I think it'd be Domantas Sabonis. All right, this next team I think is a big team that upgraded throughout the offseason. Obviously, it's the Chicago Bulls. Their core is pretty big, I'd say. Obviously, they have Zach LaVine, who I think is going to have a crazy season, DeMar DeRozan, Alonzo Ball, Nikola Vucevic, and I'd even throw Patrick Williams in their core as well. So the player I think is going to have a really good season for him is Lonzo Ball. With Lonzo, though, I need to explain what I mean by a good season. For Lonzo, I think the ideal season for him would be a sort of Rajon Rondo kind of season where he's averaging 10 and 10. Just because I think with Lonzo, he'll be able to not only like have a bunch of weapons to pass it off to, whether it be Zach LaVine off the catch and shoot, DeMar in the mid-range, Nikola all over, Patrick Williams even. But I just think that Lonzo Ball is going to be able to operate to a capacity and with the level of weapons that he's never had before. And I just think that'll allow him to really take that next step into proving why he was the second pick. But Jason Tatum's still the best player from the draft. Anyways, the player I think is going to slump is DeMar DeRozan. I'm not saying that he's going to fall off a cliff. However, I think to say that DeMar DeRozan is going to average, 25 points might be a bit of a stretch just because there's so many players that the Rock has to go to. Obviously, Zach LaVine's still your main guy, and DeMar DeRozan's going to have to, I think, learn to facilitate more. But with him being at his age, he's obviously willing to do that. We've seen in multiple interviews that right now he just cares about winning. Don't know if the Chicago Bulls are going to be the team to do that with. However, I am very excited to see Chicago Bulls basketball this season. And potential trade piece. I know I said he's almost a lock for Sixth Man of the Year. That's still a bit of a stretch. However, Kobe White. I think Kobe White still has the ability to be a starting point guard in the league, or just a guard overall. I like him better as a shooting guard, but he's just a really big luxury for the Chicago Bulls right now. Seventh overall pick, averaged crazy numbers. I think it was like 15, 4, and 5 off decent splits as well. Still struggled a bit to the point where Tomas Satoransky took his starting role. However, if I were in his shoes and I want to, be as good as I can be, I know that being a sixth man, as good as the role that is, I might see myself at a higher level. So if I were Kobe White, I might potentially explore a trade. However, fingers crossed that doesn't happen, just because I think he has a big opportunity to flourish off the bench there and just be Lou Williams, but taller and can play at least some defense. I know that's not part of his game. That's like super essential to it. But yeah, Kobe White. And if they were to trade him, I think they would just expect either another young player in return or potentially draft picks, just because they did give up quite a bit to get Nikola Vucevic. All right, next team up. They're in a very weird position, but we got the Cleveland Cavaliers. They have a core of Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, Colin Sexton, and Darius Garland. The person I think will pop off, I believe, will be Colin Sexton or Darius Garland. I think with that, we'll get into it later, but I think the two of those guys are coming off really good seasons, so I think them just building on top of that, along with more and more players, or more young players to sort of begin to build for the future, will be really nice. Colin Sexton's obviously a demon with the ball. Darius Garland was playing for the U.S. select team, so I think him taking that experience of playing, some of the international players, but just overall having that level of confidence to be like, whoa, I'm not on the USA team, but I'm right on the doorstep kind of thing. I think that will allow them to really just expand their game and get to that next level. The person I think is gonna slump, I hate to hate on this guy, but Lauri Markkanen. I don't understand why he signed to Cleveland. You're playing in a market where, or not a market, you're playing with a team that has Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, two guys that, as it stands right now, I think you could build the team around as your future front court. And Lauri Markkanen obviously wants a starting role. If I were Lauri Markkanen, I honestly would have signed with Dallas maybe. Just be another white European player in that system. But yeah, I don't know. Obviously, I want Lauri Markkanen to succeed just because, a 7-foot guy who can stretch the floor. Everybody loves that. Everybody wants that on their team. But I just don't know if he's going to be a starter this year. So because of that, I think he's going to have a bigger slump. Potential trade person. So this is also just like my pop-off selection. I think either Colin Sexton or Darius Garland needs to be traded. If I were the Cavs though, I would trade Colin Sexton just because you have an extra year with rookie contract money with Garland. But I think with Colin Sexton, Cleveland needs to trade for a bigger guard, but who also fits the timeline of their rebuild. Off the top of my head, someone like, obviously he's not going to be traded there, but someone who's like Alonzo Ball, not necessarily 6'6", but obviously just bigger than 6'1", because we've seen the peak of two small guards, which is obviously about the Western Conference Finals with the Trailblazers that one year where I think they're both 6'3". I could be wrong. I know Dame's 6'3", but I think just having your whole future kind of banking on two smaller guards, I think isn't necessarily the best plan. But yeah, I think Colin Sexton still has the ability to be a star, and potentially that might not be in Cleveland. All right, last but not least, for the Central Division, we have Detroit, the people who lucked out crazy on the lottery. Right now, I would consider their core to be Killian Hayes, Cade Cunningham, Jeremy Grant, Sadiq Bey, and Isaiah Stewart. I think just overall, even though the Pistons obviously stunk it up this year, they have a really good chance, I think, to not necessarily make the playoffs. I think their ceiling right now would be probably a play-in. But even that, I can't say with certainty just because they are a really, really young team. They literally have a whole starting five of young guys almost. And the person I think is going to pop off, Jeremy Grant. I think it's still his team at the moment. Not only that, he's coming off of an Olympic gold medal and went super crazy last year. Was obviously a finalist for most improved player, and I think Jeremy Grant is going to build on top of that. Jeremy Grant, I think, is an overall solid player, can definitely be a number one option, but obviously we'll see what happens with Cade. But yeah, Jeremy Grant going to have a really good season this year. So the person for the slump slash potential trade I picked as the same person, which was Josh Jackson. I think despite him being relatively young, I think Detroit will prioritize the young players. Obviously, guys like Sabin Lee, Killian Hayes, Cade Cunningham. I do think they're going to start Killian and Cade together. I think Cade will probably play more of the two, but either way, that'll be your backcourt. And with Josh Jackson, I think he's somewhat revived his career. Obviously, still a bit of a bust considering how high he was taken. But him realizing his situation that I think Detroit will go a lot more youth movement, except for people like Jeremy Grant and Kelly Olynyk. Josh Jackson might have to get out. I think he's going to have there's not going to be as many minutes going towards him. And I think he still has a chance to be a big impact on another team. Hopefully, he has a good season regardless, because I really did enjoy watching him have his bit of a resurgence, and I just hope he continue to build off that. And I think it's worth noting that originally I had Kelly Olynyk on here, but I realized, man, if I take Kelly Olynyk out, this is just some 2K shit, because I think regardless, if you're a team that's in a complete rebuild, you still do need veterans just because you need guys to guide your younger guys and be able to build them up. And, that's what the Canadian sensation, I think he's from Abbotsford's very own Kelly Olynyk, is there for. But either way, that's going to be the end of the Central Division. Next week, we'll see. I'm not sure what division we're going to do, but I think we're going to stick to the Eastern Conference. And then once we finish up here, then we'll go to the West. Either way, that has been another Bucks and Six podcast issue. I am your host, Danilo Jose De Hoya. Appreciate y'all listening in. And yeah, tune in next week. Have a good day. Hope y'all have a lot of blessings. But just remember, it's always been Bucks and Six.
Yeah, Bucks and six always. That's for the culture.